Welcome to Beyond the Breach. Today's episode is about total loss and what happens when an entire enterprise effectively vanishes. In 2017, one of the world's largest shipping and logistics companies, Maersk, was hit by an incredibly destructive cyber attack, widely known now as NotPetya. This wasn't ransomware in a traditional sense. It looked like ransomware. But the attacker never designed it really for recovery. It was designed for destruction. Within hours of the attack, it was spread across Maersk's global network, encrypting and wiping thousands of servers, endpoints, and critical systems. Ports stopped operating. Ships couldn't be processed. Booking systems went offline. Email stopped. Active Directory completely gone. The company didn't just suffer an outage in the usual sense, it lost its entire digital nervous system. At one point, Maersk was effectively running a global shipping empire with absolutely no IT. Just think about that for a moment. This is a company responsible for roughly 20% of global container shipping. And in a matter of hours, it disappeared operationally. Now, here's the uncomfortable truth. Security controls existed at Maersk, backups existed, but recovery wasn't designed for this level of failure. Let's break that down a little bit. Most organizations design recovery around scenarios like hardware failure, data corruption, even ransomware in a contained environment. They assume partial failure, they assume time, they assume some level of control. But NotPetya wasn't partial. It was systematic. It hit everything everywhere all at once. And that exposed a fundamental problem. The organization had no clear concept of what needed to come back first. No defined minimal viable company. No prioritized recovery sequence, no proven way to rebuild identity and infrastructure cleanly and at scale. So recovery became improvisation. Teams scrambled to rebuild systems from scratch. Infrastructure was recreated manually. Devices were rebuilt one by one. Networks were re-established under enormous amounts of pressure. And then something extraordinary happened. A single domain controller in an office in Africa had been offline during the attack due to a power outage. It survived. That one system became the foundation for rebuilding an entire global identity environment. Without it, recovery would have been significantly slower than it already was, potentially catastrophic. So let's be clear, that's not resilience, that's luck. And luck is not a strategy. Now, why does this incident matter to us today? That was back in 2017. Well, conditions that enabled that attack, they still exist. Flat networks, over-trusted identity systems, unverified backups, and most importantly in this case, no clear recovery operating model, no system for resilience. Let's go deeper into what actually failed. First of all, identity. Active Directory was completely wiped out. And when identity goes, everything goes with it. You lose authentication, you lose authorization, trust relationships, and administrative control. You can't log in. You can't manage systems. You can't coordinate recovery effectively, therefore. Identity is not just another system, it's the control plane for the entire enterprise. Secondly, recovery design. Backups existed, but they weren't immediately usable at scale. Recovery requires more than just data. It requires orchestration, order, an understanding of dependency. Without a defined recovery plan, resilience plan, if you will, teams are forced into guesswork. What do you restore first? Domain controllers, applications, databases maybe, endpoints? If you get that order wrong, you are going to be very, very slow to recover. Thirdly, clean recovery. In destructive attacks, you cannot assume that your environment is safe to restore into. You need a clean one, a known good foundation, a way to rebuild without reintroducing the threats again. Most organizations are not prepared for this. They can restore, sure, but they cannot rebuild cleanly on clean systems. So what should you take away from all of this? Well, backups alone are not guaranteed recovery. They are necessary, but they are not sufficient. Secondly, you need to define recovery strategy that is tested under extreme conditions, tested with chaos. Not just partial outages, but total loss scenarios. Third, you need a clear definition of your minimal viable company. What absolutely must come back first to keep the organization alive? Fourth, identity must be protected and recoverable above all else, because without identity, nothing else works. And my final thought on this, if your recovery depends on luck, on a surviving server, on a disconnected system or a fortunate outage, then you don't have resilience, you have hope. And of course, as we know, hope is not a control. In cyber resilience, the question isn't whether you can restore systems, it's whether you can rebuild the business quickly, cleanly, and with confidence. That's the clarity for today. Beyond the breach.